Hi, and welcome to THiNC, Taylor Homes Incorporated. This is just a test to see how Patreon rewards could be expanded. Maybe try out some videos accompanying the various posts we do on THiNC. Today, I just want to chat a little bit about Squid Game and just how fantastic a movie this was, and kind of chat a little bit about just the fun we had there. But I do think one key detail that I called out in the post that we have to keep in mind is that this is literally a morality tale. We've got a story giving us what is good and what is bad. It is showing us what is evil and what is beneficial for society. It is not a realistic story. That's even some of the violence is almost extraordinarily stylized. I watched this movie with my daughter. My daughter is has always been very, very squeamish. But she's into all things K-pop, K everything, K books, Korean dance videos, TikTok. And so when Squid Game came down the pike, she asked if she could watch it. And I had heard really explicit violence was throughout the entire show, and I was very iffy about letting her watch. But I had a rule with my other two that they could watch pretty much anything they wanted as long as they didn't mind me coming along and then talking about it. We watched it together, and actually the violence really didn't affect her much at all, and that is because it is a very stylized violence. It is very fantastic. There are a couple of very violent pieces that were explicit. The scene with the surgery and the she looked away from, and I looked away from, and so that was a little more gory and more detailed. But we're looking at something that is telling a story about ethics and morals. It is painting a picture of what is good and bad. It is highlighting an edge or a place of our society that is evil, and it is espousing a area of our society that is good. And I think you see that in our main character Ji-yoon, who is maybe a little clueless and maybe not the greatest dad, and he has a gambling problem. But don't we all have problems? Don't we all have issues that we want to overcome? And Ji-yoon aspires to be a good dad. He aspires to be there for his daughter, but is just not able to because of this gambling addiction. He ends up going to the island. He participates, and almost in a golly gee whiz sort of way, accidentalizes his way into winning. And so it's a pretty intriguing idea in that he chooses good over evil, wherein his neighborhood friend Sang-woo actually who is a part of big business, who does aspire to become a businessman, and leaves, gets an auspicious education, but he ultimately ends up choosing the wrong path. And we see that he starts out amongst the Bad News Bears group, this sort of a group that includes old people, player one, oil nam, and also females and older people, younger people, the infirm, so the down and out sorts. But Sang-woo begins to diverge, and we think he's joined this group of good people, but ultimately he turns out to be our Judas character, and he actually shows us that while he desires the the love or the friendship of his neighborhood, he actually has sold out. And so we watch as he subtly at first. I think it was the honeycomb game wherein he chooses to let others go to the more difficult shapes. He let June go on to go to the umbrella, and maybe that would kill him, and maybe that would get him further in the game. But then outright later on, Sungwoo begins literally murdering people as he goes. Bayok being the most heinous example of this. But what we're watching as a character goes from good to bad, but we also have the polar extremes, the gangsters, the evil players in the game, but also outside the game, the VIPs, the bankers, the money makers who use their money and their power for their own benefit. But we also have these good people that are just trying to do the right thing, and the game is pointing out these the disparity between these extremes, and it really shows us the problems in society today. I don't think it's specifically calling to like socialism, which may or may not be bad, but it is more explicitly calling out the evils of capitalism, or the desires of capital, desiring cash, desiring money, desiring things, and these things becoming the root of evil, right? And so if we get caught up in things, we get caught up in money, we get caught up in the pursuit of staying alive, staying, at all expense, we end up choosing the wrong path. We end up choosing the wrong direction. But what the story behind the story behind the story, the meta narrative that's going on here, which I find most exciting, is the fact that this is actually a story about good and evil, the story about justice, a story about kindness, so that we can make it to that next plane, to heaven, that we can transcend, we can move beyond, we can enter the Jordan, right? Cross the Jordan, enter the promised land, right? It is a story about life, death, and the next life. It is a story about making it to heaven. It is a story about arriving, and being weighed in the balance and not found wanting, right? That story in the Old Testament, Mene Tekel Parsin. What is that? That Daniel? Is that in Daniel? Anyway, regardless, the story is intriguing in that God comes down, writes on the wall, and tells the king that the king has been found weighed in the balance and found wanting. We don't want whoever your God might be, or whoever you believe God might be, or the supreme other. We don't want to be found wanting. Heck, if it just was amongst our friends, we don't want to be found wanting. We don't want to be found selfish, like some of these players were. I mean, look at Saibayok and how she went from kind of a cold-hearted pickpocket. She stole June's money in the beginning, but she definitely had a transcendent progression from cold-heartedness to one of love and friendship and kindness. Ultimately, dying at Sangwoo's hand. That is our Judas moment. That really horrible flip. Personally, she was my favorite character in the whole show, and to see her die that way was crushing. It was quite intense. But the brilliance of Squid Game was the fact that it played out in front of us the extremes of society, the poor, the infirm, the diabetic mother, June's mother, who dies ultimately, all the way out to the bored, on-way infused rich capitalist, and the extremes of the differences of morality between these two, and it calls out these people that don't consider the poor. Don't consider the homeless. Don't consider the elderly or the widow. Right? It's calling out your Facebooks, your Teslas, your Amazons, and saying, really, this is what we aspire to: hundreds of billions of dollars of personal wealth. And it's a pretty amazing thing. If you want another movie like this one that speaks to these same kind of archetypes and the same sort of issues, just a week or two ago I did a review for a movie called Nuevo Orden, which is New Order in English. Spanish film, a Mexican film. Heartbreaking, hardcore, super intense movie. Highly recommend it. I personally think it was better than Parasite. Fantastic movie. Really ripped the Band-Aid off of the underlying issues in our society today. Called out the rich and called out through an overthrow, right, through anarchy. I really do think if we're not careful, there will be a reallocation of wealth, and that only has ever happened in history via violence, and that could be coming. I'm not advocating for that. I'm not saying it is happening, but it could happen. The disparity between the super ultra 1% rich and the poor is just too extreme. So all that to say, that was an awesome movie, Squid Game. Totally love it. The only way you can see it right now for the first 30 days on ThiNC is via a Patreon account. Feel free to sign up over on patreon.com/ThiNC, THiNC. Also check out New Order. That's another fantastic movie. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the show.